he claims to be a believer. He claims to believe.
Believe what?
Well, that's a good question. But who were being called Christians? It's the disciples.
Right.
It says the disciples were called Christians.
Yeah.
To suggest that the Father would allow the Son to come to earth, be incarnated, teach or promote theological error in the name of the Father, that's unacceptable. That's heresy.
Yes, it's very much heresy. Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to another edition of The Uncensored Pilgrims. I'm Marty McLain, along with the irrepressible
Paul Price.
And we are here today live. Right now, in this moment, we're live.
That's right.
From the basement.
Hopefully we'll still be live by the time you're listening to this.
I don't want to die doing this podcast.
Yeah.
I don't want to die in the meantime. But Paul, we are going to do an episode today based upon a guy that you kind of got familiar with from a video.
Yeah.
And I think the topic that was being spoken about kind of intrigued you somewhat.
Yeah.
And we feel like we might need to address it.
Yeah. And maybe saying that I'm familiar with him might be a bit of a stretch, because I haven't spent a lot of time reading about this guy, and I hadn't heard of him before I caught wind of his stuff on YouTube through an interview that he did on a channel called Capturing Christianity, which I'm also not really familiar with, but what I'm seeing here I don't like. I'll put it that way. And so I felt like this would be a good segue for us to talk about not only this one individual whose name is Randal Rouser, but more broadly, we can talk about the kind of so-called progressive, which I don't even like that word, but progressive.
Kind of seems regressive, like maybe back to Satan in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, it's not really progressive, but they call themselves progressive Christians and or liberal Christians. And I know we've touched on these people quite a bit over the time since we've been doing this podcast. We've talked about various aspects of it, like with the LGBTQ plus, and with what else could you bring up? That's the big one, right, in these days. But what is this version of Christianity that they're trying to promote? And so there is an interview again on the YouTube channel Capturing Christianity called "Can You Still Be a Christian When You Don't Believe It's True?"
So, I think Christianity means that if you're a Christian, you actually have to believe certain propositional truths, right? I mean, you got to believe certain factual...
Well, not according to our resident expert, Dr. Randal Rouser, apparently. Randy, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah, so... this is part of the problem, is that the left, I will identify him with the left,
Liberals.
Even though he claims to be a believer, he claims to believe.
Believe what?
Well, that's a good question. But he claims to be a Christian, but what he's putting out there is hardly what I would want to call biblical Christianity. In the Bible, in Acts 11:26, it says... that basically they were first called Christians in Antioch, but who were being called Christians? It's the disciples.
Right.
It says the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch.
And disciples are people who...
So what's a disciple?
You learn from someone else.
Not only do you learn from them,
but
you agree with them. You believe you believe their doctrine.
Right.
So biblically speaking, I'm sorry, Dr. Randal Rouser, you're not correct. We might be getting ahead of ourselves here, but basically, Rouser's claim, he's written a book called...
Progressive Christians Love Jesus Too?
Well...
Or are you looking at
That's a different book.
Okay.
The book I'm referring to is The Doubter's Creed, How to Be a Christian When You Don't Believe It's True.
Okay, doubters and creed, is that
it's an oxymoron.
I was about to say that's an oxymoron.
So, but his whole idea for this book and why he was being interviewed here, he's saying that Christian apologists, that's people like you and me.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yeah. we've got it all wrong, according to Rouser.
Okay.
Because we're coming at this in and to use his word, agitative. We're agitating.
Now you're irrepressible, but I don't know. You're not really agitative.
Well,
but
according to Rouser, we Christian apologists are being agitative. We're agitating.
Okay.
Because we're being combative. We're saying, if you don't believe the Bible, you're wrong and the Bible's right.
Okay.
And you need to believe the Bible to be saved. You need to accept the truth of the Scriptures. You need to believe what Jesus taught and what his disciples taught. According to Rouser, we've got it all wrong by acting like that.
Yeah, and I did a little bit reading a little bit further on some of these progressives.
Yeah.
And you kind of want to say, okay, how do you actually identify them? Well, if you're a progressive and you really don't want to be affiliated with certain set beliefs in some ways.
Yeah.
And so I found this one article from a guy named Andrew Springer. It's 3 ways progressive Christianity differs from Protestantism. And this might be a little bit helpful, Paul.
Okay.
He says the first way is Christianity is a lifestyle, not a set system of beliefs.
Okay. Disagree right off the bat there.
Yes, he said the Protestants and Protestant-influenced Catholics, for them, Christianity is about accepting a set of beliefs in order to be saved. Now, he has a problem with that. He says, but progressive Christians don't see Christianity that way. In fact, to us, Christianity isn't necessarily about being saved at all. We too believe that humans are somehow reconnected to God through Jesus Christ, but we are more concerned with how that impacts this life, not the next. Mm-hmm. To us, there is no orthodoxy. There is only orthopraxy. The correct way to live our lives. How do we live as Christians? It is found in the most important Bible verse to us all, the greatest commandment. All right? He says, living the greatest commandment is what makes a Christian. As one of the great social gospel preachers of the 19th century, Washington Gladden, put it, quote, you become a Christian by choosing the Christian life and beginning immediately to do the duties which belong to it. Now, of course, the greatest of all the commandments is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So it's all about love, okay?
Sounds really really enticing, doesn't it? To somebody who might not want to assent to certain things. You know, they say it has to be orthopraxy, but I don't really think they mean that either, because
how do you know what that is?
First of all, how do you know what that is? And if you read the Bible, one of the things that would definitely not be included in orthopraxy biblically would be homosexuality.
And they're all for that.
But these guys are all for that.
Yeah,
so,
because they're all for love. Love trumps everything.
So really,
not to get political.
So really, what's going on here is that they're being disingenuous, and actually, there is a required belief system that they're putting out there. It's just not a biblical one.
Right, and it's interesting. He says, quote, were you to visit my church on Sunday morning, you'll find many who don't believe in hell. You'll find many who consider themselves spiritual but not religious. But you'll also find many who do believe in heaven and a rich understanding of Christian afterlife. The difference is for progressive Christians, that's not primarily the point. We gather to worship and live lives of love, not kill each other over what God wants us to believe or not. He says the second way you kind of identify them is that social justice is inseparable from Christianity. He says, progressive Christians, in addition to being theologically progressive, are politically progressive. We believe and fight for economic, social, racial, and ecological justice, and we do it because of our religion, because it is what God has commanded us to do. So they're pretty set on that's an absolute, right?
But God also commanded us to preach the gospel to all nations, and they're not doing that.
Yeah.
Not even to their own people are they doing that.
Yeah, he says we could go on through a list of causes that affirm social and economic justice and what that bold gospel vision looks like. Now, this is the bold gospel vision. It's universal health care. Education is a human right, not a privilege. Good schools, no matter what your zip code is.
Public education.
The right to form a union. Restorative justice. No human being is illegal. Contraceptive and family planning services free and readily available.
It sounds like the Democratic Party platform, doesn't it?
I think it's the DNC. Now,
interesting.
He gives another one. The third one is, there is no, quote, one true faith. Finally, progressive Christians do not see Christianity as exclusionary. Progressive Christians fundamentally believe in religious pluralism. Ours is not the right religion. It is not the one true faith. That's because there is no right religion at all. Now, he says about the atonement, the reconnecting of humanity to God through Christ is universal and irrevocable, no matter what you believe or what religion you follow. So, the death of Christ
now,
applies to everybody.
Who are you quoting here? Was this Rouser or
No,
somebody
this
else?
is Springer, who's given us an explanation of
Springer.
progressive Christianity.
Yeah.
So this helps lay the groundwork
So
to understand it better what Rouser...
Yeah, and now we don't want to say for sure then that necessarily Rouser himself would agree with every one of these statements.
But these, generally speaking, are what identifies...
But I will say this, though.
Progressive Christianity.
After listening to this interview with Rouser...
I don't think he had a problem with it.
I think there's a lot of commonality. Now, Rouser still claims to be a quote-unquote believer or Christian, so there might be certain aspects of what you just read that he would want to disagree with because, of what he's saying he believes. But then in practice, the way he talks and what he says we need to be doing sounds a whole lot like what you just read.
His orthopraxy?
Yeah, because he says he wants to take... First of all, he wants to separate the concept of being a Christian with being saved or a believer. And he wants us, he feels like we're...
Richard Dawkins would like that, right?
He feels like he wants to take... He thinks we need to take our focus off of this sort of combative style of apologetics and evangelism, and we just need to welcome everybody into the church, make everybody feel happy and welcome, and then by doing that, maybe over the long term, they'll gradually move toward God.
Yeah.
So he wants us to have a church environment where atheists would feel comfortable and welcome. And see, this is the problem of do we disagree? We don't want atheists to feel welcome in our church?
Oh, they can feel welcome, but they have to understand that they're not right with God.
Exactly. So
I cannot tell them that the blood of Jesus will cover them after they die.
Exactly. So that's where Rouser is stumbling. He's right that we should welcome everyone to the church.
Sure, we should. Everybody should be welcome.
But the goal of welcoming them in isn't to just give them a social club to feel comfortable in.
Yeah.
The goal is to get them saved, and not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now.
Right.
Right away. None of us are
They should know that I'm accepted at this church, but I don't belong to God because...
Unless I accept the gospel.
Right. I've got to accept the gospel, but they love me, they care for me, they accept me, but I have not accepted the gospel.
But you can't be right with God outside of Jesus, and this is where Rouser is taking this liberal.
What's universalism?
Universalist type of not. Hold on, he wouldn't even say that. He's not a universalist. He's an inclusivist.
Well, what's the difference?
The difference is works-based salvation, actually, pretty much. Or some version of it.
You have to be sincere in whatever you believe.
Or sincerity salvation. They might not. He might. I'm sure he wouldn't even agree with the term works-based.
So he would say a good Buddhist might be saved, but a bad Buddhist wouldn't.
Exactly. He's saying.
So you have to have your Hitler clause.
He's
right?
saying. Basically, it's the Hitler clause of Hitler's not going to heaven. It's not universalism, but if you're sincere in your faith, then you'll be accepted by Jesus. That's his claim.
Salvation through sincerity.
Yeah, salvation through sincerity. Exactly. That's a good one.
Did you just coin that?
I thought you did.
I thought you said it first.
Well, we'll have to play the tape back on that.
We'll have to see. I think you said it first, Paul.
But honestly, I think that's how we would maybe describe the inclusivist worldview that Rouser is promoting. It's a salvation through sincerity. You don't have to actually assent to the gospel during your earthly life.
But have sincere works in what you do.
But if you're sincere, then basically he's saying that you'll be covered by Jesus even though you were sincerely wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem because the Bible comes right out and says the opposite to that. It says, anyone who denies me...
was sincere,
Jesus said, anyone who denies me before men, I will deny before my Father in heaven.
It's pretty intense there.
Now, you can't sit here and tell me that there aren't people denying Jesus sincerely.
No.
There are.
Yeah.
So, but an inclusivist would have to say a sincere denial.
A sincere Muslim would sincerely deny the deity of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And he would sincerely believe what he believed about Islam.
And he would sincerely reject the gospel. And
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have to go with the Bible over Randal Rouser on this one.
You make the gospel of no effect.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can believe it or not. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does matter what you believe according to Scripture.
It does.
So that's the difference here. His attempt to take the term Christian and make it broad, make it apply to people who aren't even believers, is a severe heresy. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't sweep that under the rug. It's a major depart. It's not. It's a false gospel.
Because when he wrote this book in response to Alyssa Childers' book,
now that's the one about
gospel.
Liberals love Jesus too, or
progressive Christians love
progressive
Jesus
Christians
too.
love Jesus.
It's almost
too.
like he wants to maintain the identity of being a Christian, but not having the belief.
But not having the belief.
But he likes the comfort, and I think he was maybe raised in a Christian environment, and you can kind of want the comfort, and you can kind of want the vestiges of it.
I think he wants a church that Richard Dawkins would feel at home in.
The fruit, but not the root.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, here's an example. I'm looking at that video, the one about his book, The Doubter's Creed.
The Doubter's Creed.
And here is a comment that I found here that is this kind of I think it displays the whole issue that's going on here with this doctrine.
Okay.
This is a comment. This isn't from Rouser. It's just a commenter on YouTube. But he says, I am an almost lifelong gentle atheist who embraces secular humanist philosophy and scientific philosophy. I actually like the compassionate humanist aspects of the example of Jesus' life, but I am saddened by the distraction of the unnecessary salvation death cult aspect of Christianity. I am glad. Now here's where it gets good. I am glad that I grew up with a very liberal Christian pastor who prioritized how we act out our treatment of each other over what dogmatic beliefs we are supposed
What is the
to
basis?
expect.
What is the basis for your actions?
Not your beliefs,
It
apparently.
can't be your beliefs.
Well, it
Maybe
should
it's
be,
that
but
taco
it
you had last night.
Yeah.
You know, if I get hold of a bad taco, I'm not the nicest person.
But this almost lifelong quote-unquote gentle atheist apparently grew up in a Christian household, in a Christian,
what if he was
allegedly Christian church.
What if he was not a gentle atheist?
Well, then that's just bad. And
That's
if you
bad.
ask why, don't
Would that
ask that
affect whether or
question.
not you let him influence you?
Yeah.
I mean, might as well, because it's not going to be what, you know.
So what is the point here? The point is these liberal Christian pastors, you can see the fruit of what they're doing right here. They're producing these gentle atheists who think that it doesn't matter what you believe. Well, it does matter.
Well, I'm gonna just. Do I have permission to rock your world?
I want you to. Yeah. Let's do
Okay.
that.
There's a book that came out called One Faith No Longer. It's by George Yancey and Ashley Kos. I don't think that her last name's pronounceable. It's Quosigk. You are the official pronouncer. How do you say that?
Sorry. Let me see that. I'm not even going to try.
Quozik?
I don't know.
Quozik? Okay, so One Faith No Longer, The Transformation of Christianity in Red and Blue America. And here's what is spoken of in this book. It says, this is an article about it. It's a review by Bruce Riley Ashford. It says, in the introductory chapter, the authors summarize well the book's conclusion. Here's what they say. The highlights here that progressive Christians emphasize political values relating to social justice issues as they determine who is part of their in-group. They tend to be less concerned about theological agreement. Conservative Christians, however, do not put a strong emphasis on political agreement in order to determine if you are one of them. Their major concern is whether you agree with them theologically. The bottom line we seek to illuminate in this book is that progressive and conservative Christians use entirely different factors in determining their social identity and moral values. Indeed, we argue that the way in which these two groups deal with questions of meaning are so different that it is time to regard them as distinct religious groups rather than a subgroup under a single religious umbrella.
It's not only time, it's past time. Yeah.
Yes. And what happens with these progressive Christians is that they say, it's about the way we live and not what we believe.
Yeah.
But they believe a lot of stuff like social justice.
And they want you. They expect you to believe that with them too.
Yes, and here's one of the things that they found out about. We hear, beware of the Christian right, nationalists, and all that kind of stuff. The Christian right or Christian nationalists, all this kind of stuff. They want to control the country. They're all involved in politics. But they actually did a survey, a study, and the conclusion that they came to is that liberal Christians, progressive Christians, are more politically active than conservative Christians.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at what they believe. Everything they believe is a political cause.
Yes, it's a political
about
cause.
The environment, about social justice, about everything. This study found out, quote, a liberal Christian was more than twice as likely to attend a protest or march, 13% to 5%. 6 points more likely to contact a public official, 11 points more likely to donate money to a candidate, 38% to 27%, and twice as likely to volunteer their time for a candidate or campaign. Pretty hard to say that conservative Christians are more active when looking at this first graph. It's the liberal Christians that seem to be engaging in the most laborious type of political activity.
Yes.
So the narrative that you hear in the news is that conservative Christians are, all about politics, when in reality, progressive Christians are the ones that are politically active. Everything that they talk about, and if they express it, they're not going to express about people's souls, people's salvation.
Yeah.
They're going to express how we can make this world a better place through our environmental activism and through our social justice.
Yeah.
Through our availability of contraceptives in whatever form to people who need it.
Yeah.
And so there's all kinds of activism that they get involved in, but they want it to be said that it is the conservative evangelicals that are politically active, when in all reality they are the ones that are politically active. So what do you think about that? Did you realize that?
It makes sense to me. Yeah, I'm not sure if I've thought about it in exactly those terms, but this is what I see in my day-to-day life. I see that people who are liberals get way more fired up in general. Now, I'm not saying that's always true. You just look at Trump. He's got a loyal fan base, some of whom are extremely, they donate.
MAGA, baby.
Yeah, they donate. Well, I just saw an interview talking about the shooting this past weekend. That Breitbart was interviewing this lady who was a witness to it, and she had apparently been to over 30 different Trump rallies.
My goodness.
So, yeah, there are obviously conservatives who are politically active. I'm not saying that's not the case.
Yeah.
But on the day-to-day, I have, in my experience, I see what you're saying, that liberals, on average, are the more politically active because, if you think about it, their worldview is more earthly based, right?
Yeah.
All of their hope is social justice and right now, what can I do now?
Right now.
And so if that's your hope, if that's your worldview, yeah, you're going to be politically active because you want to see this world be made better by our actions.
Yeah.
Whereas Jesus taught, my kingdom is not of this world.
Yeah, nothing about eternity for them because everybody gets in free.
Yeah, everybody gets in free, so we got to work on the here and now, not eternity.
Yeah.
The Bible says, what does it gain to profit the whole world but lose his soul?
Right.
The soul comes first for biblical Christians. Yeah. And so we spend all of our time, most of us, a lot of us anyway, we put more emphasis on the spiritual and less on the physical, less on the here and now, less on ultimately politics.
Yeah.
So, and that's to our detriment when it comes to politics.
Yeah, and if we ever speak out, then you're politically
and then
involved.
if we do speak out, then we're radicals.
Yeah.
We're alt-right. We're fanatics.
Yeah, but look how much liberal politicking takes place in progressive liberal churches.
But here's what it comes down to in a lot of cases. And I'm sure that Rouser would probably make a statement similar to this. But in his mind, or I won't say his mind, but I will say in the minds of people who accept this type of inclusivism, it's not fair, according to them, that God would let anybody go to hell who, according to them, never had a chance to hear the gospel.
Yeah.
Now, I just don't accept that premise. That's the problem. I think everybody has a chance to hear the gospel. And I think God, if God is all knowing and omniscient, then if you are seeking the truth from God and not just accepting, let's say you're born in a Muslim world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Christianity's not legal. You can't just walk down the street and jump into a Christian church and hear the gospel that way.
Right.
But let's say you're praying to God as a sincere person who at least believes that God exists, and you pray to God for the truth. You want to know the truth. You want to know Him. Do you think that God's not capable of answering that prayer one way or another? I think He is.
Sure.
But the liberal would say that God wouldn't answer that prayer, and therefore we shouldn't say that they would go to hell because they just had no chance to hear the gospel. Well, that's not the case. Like, there are plenty of testimonies of Muslims who have said prayers just like that and have had Jesus show up, supernatural revelation of Jesus or angels, and it's like, and then they get some way or another, they get connected up with a missionary.
Right.
So don't tell me that God can't get the gospel anywhere He wants to get it.
You're right.
That's just a cop-out. That's not the case.
Let me ask you about this article I got that Randal wrote back in January 10th, 2014. He says, why Jesus almost certainly had some errant theological beliefs.
Okay. Jesus, being God, had errant theological beliefs.
In his humanity. During the course of this article, he says, quote, the problem is that this imputes a bizarre psychology to Jesus, which undermines the humanity of Jesus.
Isn't that what we call the kenotic heresy?
Okay.
I think there's a heresy called the kenotic heresy. I think he's committing it right there.
Well, he says, the problem is that this imputes a bizarre psychology to Jesus, which undermines the humanity of Jesus, separating it drastically from the common human experience it is meant to emulate. Consequently, it has nothing to commend it. In conclusion, we are far better off accepting that Jesus had at least one, and likely an indeterminate number of false theological beliefs, so long as there are no false theological beliefs of soteriological import among them. That is from the Tentative Apologist.
Okay, that is definitely a heresy, because if you look, you can go to Got Questions, for example.
Yes.
You can look up
a very good website.
There's a page there called "What is Kenoticism" or Kenotic Theology.
All right.
And basically, it's this. The kenosis is a biblical concept.
Yes.
But this type of theology gets heretical by taking that too far, and saying that Jesus didn't just emptying Himself of divine privilege to become a man, but He actually emptied Himself of divinity itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, denying that Jesus as a man was still fully God, that's what he seems to be doing there.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think they'd have a problem doing that if you don't really base your beliefs on facts or what you consider propositional truth.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think. I think if it's more about orthopraxy than orthodoxy.
Yes. So Jesus did not give up divine attributes. He did not become fallible.
Right.
So, I'm not going to say that like when Jesus emptied Himself, let's say, for example, there's that famous verse that we always get taken to when they ask, when are these things going to take place? And Jesus says, of that day and hour, no man knows, not even the Son, but only the Father.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's grant that as part of His human emptying of full divine privilege, let's grant for a moment that He did not, as a man, He did not possess that piece of information in His mind at that moment because of the kenosis, if you will.
Okay.
Okay, if we grant that doesn't mean He made an error. He answered truthfully and without error there.
True.
Saying, I don't know, only the Father knows, is not an error. It's not a theological error.
Yeah.
To suggest that the Father would allow the Son to come to earth, be incarnated, teach or promote theological error in the name of the Father, that's unacceptable. That's heresy.
Yes, it's very much heresy.
And ask whoever said that,
it's Randal
Rouser, ask that person, okay, what is the error you're claiming he made then?
Yeah.
And how do you know it was an error? Because then you would have to be putting yourself above Jesus to determine, you're going to determine what an error was when Jesus is, you supposedly believe Jesus is God, right?
Yeah.
But yet you think that you know better than God.
Okay, here's what I said. Jesus likely believed the earth is a flat disc or something
Oh,
similar,
my goodness.
from which it follows that Jesus would have thought God believes the earth is a flat disc. Don't get caught up quibbling over the flat disc example. Just example. The point is that Jesus had at least one false belief about the nature of the world. So if you don't like my example, slot in your own. But it is false to believe that God believes the earth is a flat disc, because the earth is not a flat disc and God has no false belief. Thus, Jesus had at least one false theological
But
belief.
where is his evidence that Jesus thought that the earth was a flat disc? Oh, I'm sorry. Am I quibbling? Like,
I think you are.
you can't just make a statement like that without any shred of evidence and then expect people not to take issue with it.
Yeah.
There is zero evidence that Jesus believed the earth was a flat disc.
Yeah.
So
He said,
that's a non-starter.
now we know that as a first century Jew, Jesus had non-culpable false beliefs which were the product of his time and culture. For example, Jesus likely believed the earth is a flat disc.
Did you catch the word likely there?
Yes.
Where's his? That's in
From
other
which
words.
it follows Jesus would have thought God believes the earth is a flat disc.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that is just unacceptable. You cannot throw that word. You can't throw an allegation like that without a shred of evidence.
Well, once you say, well, it doesn't matter what I believe I'm a Christian, and it's how I live.
Yeah.
It's not what I believe, and all that kind of stuff. It gets so experiential, and then you don't have anything to anchor your actions on, because you don't believe in factual.
Let's look at
propositional
this.
truth about Jesus.
I think I can give you a piece of evidence that Jesus didn't think the earth was a flat disc. You know what I can tell you?
Okay.
What do you think I'm going to point to? All right,
Tell me.
I think it's Matthew 24, but when Jesus is talking about the second coming,
Yeah.
what does he say? He says some people will be working
Yeah.
and some people will be
Sleeping.
So that means in some places on the earth it's dark,
Yeah.
and other places on the earth it's light.
Yeah.
How would that be possible on a flat disc?
I don't know. We have to talk to flat earthers.
I can give you a little science experiment. Take a plate,
Okay.
which is what a flat earther believes the
All right.
earth is, and take a flashlight and shine it above that plate.
Okay.
Now imagine yourself getting very tiny and standing on that plate. Where would you go on the plate that would not be light?
Couldn't.
You couldn't, could you?
Uh,
It doesn't work on a flat earth.
yeah.
You cannot have one part of the plate be light and the other part be dark
Yeah.
on a flat earth. That does not work.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Jesus did not believe the earth was flat. He himself prophesied that there are places of the earth where at the same time it's dark in one place, people are sleeping, so it's nighttime,
Uh-huh.
and on the other part of the world, it's working time. People are up.
Once again, that's why you get the big bucks.
That is a sphere. That is not a plate.
Wow.
Jesus did not believe it was a plate.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry,
Randall.
Okay. Well, here's a guy that Randall would probably be really good friends with. They would go on vacations together. I don't know. It's kind of my guess. Brian McLain.
Okay.
He wrote a book called A Generous Orthodoxy.
Now, I don't know him, so you'll have to fill me in.
He was a pastor, and back in the late '90s, early 2000s, I was doing get my doctor of ministry degree project in postmodernism and how that affects preaching, and I was reading some of his stuff, and I was like, oh my word. I thought, this guy's going off. But yet he was still being sold in Baptist bookstores, and he was still kind of within the realm of acceptability in evangelical circles, kind of like Rob Bell was.
Uh-huh.
And sure enough, this guy went off the side. Okay, but here's what he says in the foreword to this, or on the jacket of this A Generous Orthodoxy book. He said, quote, "To be a Christian in the generous Orthodox way is not to claim to have the truth captured, stuffed, and mounted on a wall. It is rather to live and grow in a loving community of people who are seeking the truth on the road of mission and who have been launched on the quest by Jesus, who with us guides us still. Do we have it? Have we taken hold of it? Not fully, not yet, of course not, but we keep seeking. We're finding enough to keep us going, but we're not finished. That to me is orthodoxy. a way of seeing and seeking, a way of living, a way of thinking and loving and learning that helps what we believe become more true over time, more resonant with the infinite glory that is God.
It sounds like McLaren is looking for truth in a stuffed deer head on the wall for some reason. I don't know.
I read stuff like that and I'm thinking, what did I just read?
That's a good question, because it seems as if he's ignoring the fact that we have the Bible. So, no, we don't have the truth stuffed and mounted on the wall.
Yeah,
whatever that means. We have it in the Bible.
Right.
That's where it is. It's not on the wall, and we don't have to seek for it like we don't have it.
Yeah.
We do have it. It's in the Bible.
Right.
That's orthodoxy.
Right.
So, no, he's way, way off base there.
Yeah, these guys are, I think they could only come out, they could not start things themselves. They could only come out of something that's established like Orthodox Christianity.
Yes.
Because if they just came out of the blue and started saying stuff that they're saying, people would be like, y'all don't make sense.
Yeah, imagine if the first Christians had McLaren's attitude or Rouser's attitude.
We wouldn't be here today.
We would not be here today, because
Absolutely
they were very
not.
much agitators.
Yeah.
They were agitators to the point that they got themselves martyred.
Yeah.
Now, Rouser's deal is...
Rouser is not rousing.
No, he's not. At least he doesn't claim to be.
No, he's not.
Now, if we took his attitude of, well, you don't believe it? Fine. That you don't have to believe it, but let's just stay friends and keep coming to church, and let's keep working together on social projects.
Yeah.
If that was the attitude of the early Christians, they never would have been martyred.
Yeah.
Never at all. And they certainly wouldn't have refused to say Caesar is Lord.
Yeah.
Because they could have just come up with a
I'm going
justification
I'm going to heaven anyway if I say Caesar is Lord.
Why would I not say Caesar is Lord? That's their truth.
Yeah.
And
I can be sincere. If I'm
and when
sincere
I
about
say
it, I can say it with sincerity, and that'll count for something.
Yes. So, no, it's not biblical Christianity. It's heresy.
Well, let me read this to you. The Alyssa Childers, she used to be with the girl band called Zoe Girl. I think my girls listened to them when they were growing up.
That's not something I've ever heard of.
That used to be. I'm glad. I would be kind of. I don't know.
A little bit freaked out, or
yeah, I'd be kind of nervous if you say, "Yeah, I was a big Zoe Girl fan, man." Yeah, the Zoe Girls. Anyway, her name is Alyssa Childers. She wrote a book about progressive Christianity based on her own experience being in a church that went progressive and how it impacted her life. And as a matter of fact, the book that she wrote, Another Gospel, is why Randal Rouser wrote his book, Progressive Christians Love Jesus Too.
Yes.
So she gives some signs that your church is headed toward progressive Christianity. Okay, here's what she says. Several years ago, my husband and I began attending a local evangelical non-denominational church, and we loved it. We cherished the sense of community we found among the loving and authentic people we met, and the intelligent, quote, outside-the-box pastor who led our flock with thought-provoking and insightful sermons. Sadly, the church started going off the rails theologically, and after about a year and a half, we made the difficult decision to leave. Today, that community is self-titled, quote, progressive Christian community. She said, back then I had never heard of progressive Christianity, and even now it is difficult to pin down what actually qualifies someone as a progressive Christian, due to the diversity of beliefs that fall under that designation. However, there are signs, certain phrases, and ideas that seem to be consistent in progressive Christian circles. Here are the 5 danger signs to watch for in your church. Number 1, there is a lowered view of the Bible. One of the main differences between Christianity, progressive Christianity, and historic Christianity is the view of the Bible. Progressive Christianity generally abandons these terms, such as saying the Bible is the Word of God and that it's authoritative for our lives, emphasizing personal belief over the biblical mandate. Okay. She says some comments you might hear are, the Bible is a human book. I disagree with the Apostle Paul on that issue. And also the Bible, quote, contains the Word of God.
Yeah.
Now, the second one is feelings are emphasized over facts. In progressive churches, personal experiences, feelings, and opinions tend to be valued above objective truth. Some comments you might hear, Paul, would be, the Bible doesn't really resonate with me. Or, I thought homosexuality was a sin until I met and befriended some gay people. And
Yeah.
the third sign that your church might be headed toward progressive Christianity is, quote, essential Christian doctrines are open for reinterpretation. She quotes progressive author John Pavlovich, quote, there are no sacred cows in progressive Christianity. Tradition, dogma, and doctrine are all fair game because all pass through the hands of flawed humanity, unquote.
But I think there is a sacred cow, and that is this tolerance that they're talking about.
Well, you're
That's
close.
the sacred cow.
She says the only sacred cow is, quote, no sacred cows.
Well, that's it. Okay.
That's another
So,
way. I mean,
the same basic
yeah,
idea.
just everything goes. Comments you might hear are, quote, the resurrection of Jesus doesn't have to be factual to speak truth. Another one is, quote, the church's historic position on sexuality is archaic and needs to be updated within a modern framework.
Okay.
The fourth one is historic terms are redefined. There are some progressive Christians who say they affirm doctrines like biblical inspiration, inerrancy, and authority, but they have to do linguistic gymnastics to make those words mean what they want them to mean.
Yeah. Well, we saw Rouser doing that with the word Christian.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean somebody who's a disciple who believes the Bible. Now it just means somebody in a community
Yeah.
that uses the word Christian.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, she said, here's some things that you would hear in that type of church. Quote, God wouldn't punish sinners. He is love. Another one is, quote, it's not our job to talk to anyone about sin. It's our job to just love them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the fifth one is the heart of the gospel message shifts from sin and redemption to social justice.
Yeah.
Many progressive Christians today find the concept of God willing his son to die on the cross to be embarrassing or even appalling. Sometimes they refer to it as, quote, cosmic child abuse.
Yep. I've encountered that a lot.
And
This is when people claim that they have a problem with, they don't have a problem with the gospel, but they just have a problem with penal substitutionary atonement.
that's really big with progressives.
Yeah, they usually don't like penal substitutionary atonement.
No.
Yeah, I've experienced that.
Some comments you might
We
hear.
did a whole episode on that, I recall.
Yeah.
Yes.
Seems like I remember that.
Yeah.
But we've almost been at it for 2 years, Paul.
Has been a while.
Yeah. Let's see. Comments you might hear, quote, sin doesn't separate us from God. We are all made in his image, and he called us good. Another one is, quote, we don't really need to preach the gospel. We just need to show love by bringing justice to the oppressed and provisions to the needy, unquote.
Yeah.
So,
When he called us good, that was before the fall.
yeah. So, these are some of the ways in which you can tell that your church is heading in progressive fashion. Paul, I don't think our church is heading in progressive fashion.
No, I haven't heard any of those kind of statements at our church.
And, I don't even want to, I would never want to be a part of a church that would be progressive.
No, and most people don't, which is why they tend to die out once they go that way.
They die.
Because even the progressives they get to the point where they're too lazy to show up.
Yeah, they're like, why am I going there anyway?
Yeah.
I want to go to, First Watch has a really good brunch.
Yeah.
And, I'd rather go there than go hear something that person speaking don't even believe in the first place, and it's not going to make a difference in my life anyway, so why not want to go?
Now you tell me if I'm off the rails here, but I think if you took the average political spectrum of your average First Watch eater,
Yeah.
would that be a progressive? Or would
It
that
might
be,
be, but, I like First Watch.
Yeah.
I do, and I'm really conservative dude.
I've tried to like them, and
You don't like them?
I think they're a little overpriced for what you
Well,
get.
they're overpriced, but I know this sounds like I'm a liberal wearing skinny jeans, but I like the avocado toast, man. and you cut a half-boiled egg on it,
Yeah.
a little bit of salt and pepper, and some alfalfa sprouts. Dude,
You're sounding more like a liberal
I mean,
especially when you start talking about alfalfa sprouts.
I'm almost ashamed of myself
Yeah.
when I get it, but it's really good, man. I mean, I like that stuff.
Man, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So,
You know, I used to think King Wall was one of the characters on Star Wars, but you know, now I've gotten where I really like the stuff.
I think you've been spending too much time at First Watch.
I think I need to stop. I just need to stop.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, do you have anything that? What would you? Okay, we did this about Richard Dawkins, and you're the official spokesperson because you have good diction when you speak and you pronounce words correctly.
Okay.
What would you say to Randy Rouser?
I would say, Dr. Rouser, I don't believe you have any right to decide for yourself what the word Christian means or what it means to call yourself a Christian. You have to go to the Bible. If you want to use that word in its correct historical, accurate context, you can't lift it out of that context and then start defining it to mean, well, whatever the local community in space-time wants to call it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
The word Christian is just a word for a disciple of Jesus. And Jesus himself was very clear. If you love me, obey me.
Yes.
If you claim to be my disciple, you have to believe what I taught. You have to obey it.
Yeah.
You can't make up your own thing and then call yourself a disciple.
Okay.
And that's what, I don't know what all of Rouser's beliefs are, but at the very least, he's condoning people who don't share the beliefs that Jesus taught.
Yeah.
He's condoning them using the word Christian
Well, the thing
to
is,
describe themselves.
he puts so much out, be it through a book, through a blog, through videos, that he wants people to know what he believes. And
my problem is I haven't read all that stuff.
And he
so
wants to influence people with what he believes.
Yeah, and
but
so,
what we can read, we're like, no.
And that's why I'm trying not to put too many words in his mouth since I haven't read his books. But what I have
Would
seen
you
of
debate him?
Sure. I wouldn't have a problem
Would
with
you
that.
give him a standing invitation? Would you give him a standing invitation for a debate?
Sure. But I don't think he's going to listen to our podcast, and I don't think he knows he would care to participate.
You don't think Paul Price, that name, carries weight?
Not particularly, but that's okay.
I think it does.
But I do think that, what he's doing is exceedingly damaging to the church.
Yeah.
He thinks the opposite. He thinks that people like you and me that are being combative with unbelievers, we're the ones doing harm because we're pushing people away.
Down
and he says, when you tell somebody they're wrong, that just makes them close down.
Yeah.
So you're using bad strategy. You shouldn't tell them they're wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that's just not what the Bible... Now, he uses an example where he says, well, Paul at Mars Hill used this. But no, Paul at Mars Hill didn't do that.
Look at the crux when he gets to the end of it. He says, this Jesus was raised from the dead. They didn't want to think about a resurrected body. They wanted liberation of the soul from the body.
So it's true that Paul started by getting some common ground with his listeners.
Stay common
but
ground.
He didn't stay there.
Some of them laughed at him. Some of them considered, and some of them believed.
So our purpose as a Christian and as a disciple is not to just sit in this common ground zone for years or forever.
Yeah.
That's the lie that we're being told by these guys. Our goal isn't to find common ground and unite everybody regardless of their doctrine. None of what these guys
Paul,
are teaching.
it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you believe.
Well, that's not the truth. Just like you go to your math class, you put the wrong answer down. If you have a good math teacher, your math teacher isn't going to say, it doesn't matter what you put as long as you were convinced of it.
Did you try?
Did you try? Did you get an E for effort?
Were you sincere in those answers?
No. So, no, sincerity isn't what gets us to heaven.
Yeah.
It's only Jesus, and the only way that you get access to Jesus is by accepting the gospel. You have to believe what the apostles taught.
Yeah.
You don't get to pick and choose out of it.
Right.
You don't get to... Now, I'm not saying that you can't... I'm not saying that there's no room for brotherly disagreement on any issues.
Right.
But I'm saying that there are core salvational issues for which there is no room for disagreement. Right. And there's no salvation outside of Jesus. So, no, you cannot be a sincere Muslim and go to heaven. No, you cannot be a sincere Hindu and go to heaven. Now, you can be one of these things. You can be sincere, and out of your sincerity, you can seek out for the truth, and God can show you the truth.
Right.
But He's not going to leave you in a false pagan, falsehood, and then just say, well, it doesn't matter. No.
And C.S. Lewis talking about Aslan receiving worship
Yeah, that was a problem. So one of the things that Randal Rouser appeals to is C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
But the problem is C.S. Lewis, though he had a lot of good stuff,
He's not infallible.
He's not infallible. He did make some errors.
Yeah.
And we've talked about some of his errors before. Like, for example, he promoted a heresy in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when he suggested that Aslan had to pay the price, the guilt. He had to pay that to, not to the father, but to the witch.
To the White Witch.
To the witch.
Yeah.
He had to pay it to her like he owed her.
Yeah.
That's not, so there was a heresy there. And some people, that is a belief that some people hold, is that when Jesus died on the cross, he was paying a debt to Satan, to pay off Satan.
Right.
But no, Satan never was owed anything.
Right.
So that's incorrect. There are some errors that you'll find in C.S. Lewis. He did have some of this idea of, well, there's some inclusivism. You can be sincere and still go to heaven. And I just have to disagree with that because it's not found. It's contrary to what Scripture teaches. But I think people are basing that view on a misunderstanding of God's omnipotence. They're unintentionally limiting God.
Yeah.
It's as if they think God can't reach somebody on a desert island or in the middle of a Muslim country. Of course he can.
Sure. I agree, man.
So there you go. And another thing, the Bible clearly teaches that God is the one who instituted the boundaries of nations.
Right, he did.
He did. And he did it with his foreknowledge.
Right.
So, he has a plan for each and every one of us. So don't tell me that there's people born today that just have no access to God.
Yeah.
God is everywhere.
Right.
But he's not going to accept worship under a falsehood.
Yes, you're right. Okay, well, we want to thank y'all for listening to this episode of The Uncensored Pilgrims. And we hope y'all all have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, we'll have another interesting topic next time, just when once we figure out what it is.
All right, see y'all later. And we need to let you know that the views that we express on this podcast belong to Marty McLain and Paul Price. They are our views. They do not reflect the views of anyone else. And with that said, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.